So have you been thinking about making a move to Sebastopol, California, but you're not quite sure if this part of the world is the right place to land? Well, if that's the case, then today's video is for you, because I'll be summarizing the pros and cons, the way I see it, of living in Sebastopol, California. I'm Stephanie Johnson, and I've been a real estate agent for more than 20 years. And I moved to Sebastopol 5 years ago, and I really haven't looked back. I left San Francisco and came north to live in Sonoma County. And I actually love living in this part of the world, but there are some drawbacks to living in Sebastopol, and I want to make sure I lay out all the wonderful things about being here and some of the things you might want to consider before you bring your family and land in this part of the world. So thanks for watching, and let's get into it. So I would say hands down, my favorite thing about living in Sebastopol has to be the weather. I think it's practically perfect. And the reason I say that is because we do have 4 seasons, but it's fairly mild here also. For instance, in the summer, we have temperatures that get up into the 80s with regularity, but we don't often have those hot, high 90s over 100 days. And if we do, it's very short-lived. It's a quick couple-day burst, and it happens maybe once a year. And so, for the most part, summer is very manageable. It feels warm. You can wear summer clothing. You can be by a pool. You can have a super summer experience, but you're not sweltering and in pain and kind of running inside all day to kind of stay out of the heat. That's not the case in a lot of parts of Sonoma County. So if you go east of us and even into Santa Rosa, the temperature jumps pretty quickly. If you go even further east into the Sonoma Valley, summers can be pretty excruciating, especially like in the Sonoma Valley and up through Healdsburg. It gets very, very, very hot. And so I like West County because I get the summer experience, but I'm not suffering. In addition, we're pretty close to the ocean, and so we have a lot of ocean influence in our weather. So we have some foggy mornings, and then they tend to burn off and be sunny during the day. In spring, summer, and into fall, we usually have beautiful weather. And I would say that that ocean influence also means we have a little more green grass and a little more dampness in the air and also in the soil. And so we are a low fire zone. And so I think if you're looking to move to Sonoma County and you really want to make sure you can get insurance and that you're, maybe not taking on more risk than you'd like to in terms of fire, West County is a really nice option. On the flip side, in the winter, it does get cold, and we do get quite a bit of precipitation, especially in certain years. We get a lot of rain. But that said, it doesn't tend to freeze very often in Sebastopol for the same reason, because we have this kind of coastal influence. And that's pretty nice. I'm a gardener. I like to grow citrus. It's a pain to have to cover your roses and your citrus and all these plants that are not really meant for the frosty weather. And so it's a really kind of easy gardening climate too. You can grow things pretty much all year round and not have to worry too much about frost. I mean, it is something that threatens on occasion, but it's not a big worry. Let's put it that way. In addition, the nice thing about Sebastopol is we do have microclimates. In town, it's certainly warmer than where I live on the south side of town. As you get closer to the ocean, it gets cooler. You have more redwoods, more fog, more kind of coastal influence. And as you move north to Grayton, it gets hotter. There's a lot more vineyards up there. And so if you're looking for, a little more heat or a little less heat, you can kind of drill into the various, areas inside of Sebastopol by just, moving in different areas of this part of the world. So the second reason that I love living in Sebastopol, and this reason was really a huge factor in me choosing to live here as opposed to living in other parts of Sonoma County, is that it's just a small town. There are only about 7,500 people that live in the town of Sebastopol. And if you compare that to Petaluma to the south, they have over 60,000 people that live there. And so the difference in terms of the energy and the congestion and the stress of living in those two places, to me, was meaningful enough that I wanted to choose Sebastopol to bring my kind of next chapter and raise my kids. And the thing I love about it is that, the experience of going downtown is pretty easy. It's rare that there's traffic downtown. If there is traffic, it's usually right around the commute hour. And Annalee High School, is right downtown. And so that drop-off time for school plus the congestion of the commute can be a little busy. But other than that, my experience has been when I want to go downtown and run errands or go out to eat, I usually just pull up and park within a half block of where I'm going, and there's no drama at all. And that's not the case when I visit Sonoma or Petaluma. depending on when you visit, other towns, it can be very congested and it can be very, hard to park and get around. So I would say that's a big plus for me. Leaving San Francisco where, your whole life is stress and traffic and trying to find a parking space and congestion and noise. I was really to a place after living in that environment for 25 years, ready to leave that whole part of my life behind. And I wasn't willing to move 40 minutes away and still be dealing with traffic and congestion. So Sebastopol to me was a no-brainer because it's very small and it's very easygoing. I also would say because of the size of the town, it's really easy to raise kids here. I find that, when I was trying to get my kids in the Little League, for instance, in San Francisco, I'd have to get up at 5 in the morning and log on and, register in advance and then log on and quickly register them because within 10 minutes, all of the slots for Little League for that season were gone. And so the stress of having to, remember to do that, to get up and deal with all of that, the demand and the lack of supply of sort of opportunity really wore on me over the years. And so coming here, Little League never sells out. There's always a spot for your kid. And Little League, there's just not that many people that live here, And the flip side is that if your kids play like competitive sports and they want to play on a club team, you immediately have to leave the area. Sebastopol does not have a club team. You have to go into Santa Rosa or maybe Petaluma to join a team where there's more, competitiveness. But that said, if that's not your reality, Sebastopol is a great place because it's just really easy. Camps, for instance, don't fill up. Sports don't fill up. It's just not that big of a deal to wait a week or two to schedule your kids' summer, And so I find that has been a huge weight lifted off my parenting shoulders. And, I actually love it. And I think you'll love it too. So the third reason why I really love Sebastopol is down to the community here. And it's a really close-knit community. It's a very creative community. A lot of artists and musicians and writers and poets, you name it, they just have descended on Sebastopol and really made it their own. And it feels like a very creative place, which is great. And my children have really benefited from that because even though this is a very small town, one of my sons is a musician and he has access to incredible teachers here that you wouldn't think you'd have access to when you left the Bay Area. But sure enough, he's had some really wonderful experiences in Sebastopol. And that's been a really great surprise and a lovely part about living here. I will say the community on the whole, because it's a small town, it's pretty tight. People who've lived here for generations know each other, their families know each other. And it's a real small town vibe. I'm fairly new. I've been here, 5 years, as I said. And so I finally feel like I know enough people in town that I go downtown and I run into people. And that's been really nice, because there was a feeling for me of anonymity when I lived in a big city, even though I did know quite a bit of people in my neighborhood by the time I left. In a way, even though I haven't been here as long, certainly my sense that my children are really held in this community because people look out for each other, that's been a really nice, relief. In some ways, to know that there are more than just me looking out for my kids. And I really like that about Sebastopol and feel that it's special about this place. And there are so many events that reflect that community spirit. I mean, everything from the Apple Blossom Parade, which happens in the spring, which is a very sweet hometown parade. All the kids and marching bands in all the different schools perform in that parade. Lots of local artists perform in that parade. It's a very cool event that brings the whole town downtown to watch it. And it's a celebration of the heritage here of the apple industry being a huge part of the economy here for so many decades. Now it's a smaller part of the economy, but it's certainly celebrated as part of the history of this place, which is cool. There's an event in the fall called the Gravenstein Apple Fair, which celebrates the local heirloom variety, the Gravenstein. You'll notice if you come to Sebastopol, there's a school district called Gravenstein and lots of other things with that name. And that's after the apple, which was originally a Russian variety that was brought to California during the Russian settlement here. And now it's, a big part of the culture in Sebastopol, which is cool. In addition to those two events that bookend the summer, there are a lot of other really nice things that happen throughout the year that bring the community together. One is Halloween, which is a really fun event in Sebastopol and was a fun surprise to find out because the whole town descends on Florence Avenue, which is a cool little street that's known for a sculptor that lives there who makes these very whimsical metal sculptures, and they line the street. And so that's a place to go take a look at his work if you're in Sebastopol and you like, fun, whimsical art. But they close that street to traffic, and all the houses on that street get decked out. They go crazy with decorations. They give candy out, and there's often live music. And of course, because people here are really creative, the costumes are really, really fun. So we had an element of that in San Francisco, and I was really happy when we moved here to find out that we weren't gonna lose that. And in fact, it got even better moving to Sebastopol. Also on the 4th of July, there's a big fireworks display that happens the night before the 4th of July in Sebastopol, and it brings the whole town. Usually every year they have it at the high school. Last year they had it down at the baseball fields near the community center. And everybody sort of descends. There's a ton of food vendors that come out and serve food, and there's music, and then once it's dark, the fireworks display happens, and that's a lot of fun. You run into people the kids run into all their friends, and it's just a safe, enjoyable way to celebrate the holiday. Sebastopol's also known for the hippie movement that descended here in the 1960s and sort of came to drop out and live off the land. And there are still people here that carry on the tradition. I know several people who grew up here who lived in a house that was completely off the grid. They grew their own food, barely went to town and really had a very natural upbringing. And, that energy is still alive and well in Sebastopol. It's expressed in the nickname that Sebastopol has, which is Peace Town. There's a Peace Town music festival that happens every summer that's put on by some people that have been here for a very long time. They also have a choir, which is really cool. And so I think, the energy, the creative sort of hippie energy, I think it makes Sebastopol quirky and fun and special, and also contributes to the sort of loving energy that I think I feel and felt when I started coming here, and that compelled me to move here. Moving to Sebastopol was actually one of the first major life decisions that I ever made where I didn't really think very hard about it, and I didn't weigh pros and cons. Actually, I actually made the decision with just how I felt when I was here. And it ended up being one of the best decisions that I've ever made. And so, I encourage you to pay attention to how you feel when you're in Sebastopol and see if it's the same for you. Of course, I'm a foodie, as you may know from watching some of my videos by now. And so Sebastopol ranks very high for me in terms of the food scene. And that's surprising in a way because the town is so small. I mean, for a town of 7,500 people, we have a tremendous number of very, very good restaurants. And I have clients that I sold a home to in Santa Rosa, and when I see them, they're like, oh, we're in Sebastopol every week eating dinner. And I think that's the case for a lot of people that live outside of Sebastopol, but within a quick drive. They're in our town eating at our restaurants because we have some amazing ones. And some of my favorites are like Ramen Gaijin, which is a ramen place. They have other things too, but that's what I always order when I'm there. And it's really, really wonderful right downtown. That owner also owns another restaurant in town called Khom Loi, which has been honored by Michelin. And so that's a really wonderful restaurant. I love the Redwood, which has a sort of natural wine list, which is very interesting. And they also make some really beautiful seasonal food. I love Goldfinch, which is right downtown. I love Hana Sushi. I love Handline. I take the kids to Handline all the time. That used to be the old Foster Freeze in town. And when they opened Handline, they kept the soft serve ice cream, which my kids love. So we have amazing homemade ice cream. We have amazing food of all different kinds in Sebastopol. And it's surprising that a small community could support so many restaurants. But I think it's because we're such a draw for the larger community in Western Sonoma County and even into Santa Rosa and Healdsburg that people come here to eat. So I recommend you do the same when you're trying to figure out if Sebastopol is a place you'd like to live. If you're coming from, a bigger city or, somewhere else in California where you have a lot of restaurants, a lot of food choices, I don't think you'll be disappointed when you come to Sonoma County. Between Sebastopol, Petaluma, Sonoma, Healdsburg, I mean, we have a lot of food here, and Sebastopol is one of the diamonds in my opinion. So that's really great. In addition, we have a tremendous number, of course, of farmers. There's a big agricultural industry here. And so we have a farmer's market that is very, very nice on Sunday mornings, right downtown in the town square. And I go there to get all of my seasonal fruits and vegetables, plant starts. So when the growing season starts, I go buy, fruit and vegetable starts for my own garden. They have basket weavers and, prepared food makers and bakers and you name it. little farmer's market is chock full of amazing food. So I highly recommend, if you're up here for a weekend and you're thinking about Sebastopol as a place you might like to land, hit the farmer's market and check it out. And the last reason that I love Sebastopol is just that you're really living in and amongst the natural world. And that was another reason why I chose it. I was sort of tired of living in concrete and in stress, and my body was yelling at me to change my life. And so Sebastopol felt like the right place, because as soon as I started visiting here and selling homes to other people who were trying to buy up here, either for a second home or to move their family, every time I came here, my body felt good. And I was like, well, I can't argue with this. This feels amazing. And it feels like what I want to feel like for a long time to come. And so I made the big choice to change my life and move here. And I have not regretted it. I actually love being on a piece of land where I have access to this beautiful little town, but I have trees around me and nature, and it's very quiet. There's no sirens and traffic. There's only birds and owls and squirrels and, rustling of trees. I mean, it's actually really beautiful. In addition to just living physically in nature all the time, I have access to some wonderful regional parks and places to walk and be outside and take the dog. For instance, the Laguna, which is just to the east of Sebastopol on Highway 12, is a really lovely wetland sanctuary that has miles of trails. It's beautiful. It can be muddy in the winter, so be careful when you go. After a heavy rain, might not be wise without some real boots, but it's spectacularly beautiful and a really nice place to walk the dog or just get some exercise. In addition to the Laguna, there's Regal Park, which is just to the west of town, and you can walk through Regal Park. There's like 3+ miles of trails, over 150 acres of a beautiful park setting. Again, playgrounds and soccer fields, etc. as well, but lots of little trails in the back of the park, and it's a really lovely place to go with the dog or with a friend as well. And then of course, we're also blessed in West County to have the Cross County Trail, which was an old train line that was converted into a walking and biking path. And we are right smack in the center of this trail system that is quite long. It goes from Santa Rosa, that stretch is called the Joe Rodota Trail, and it goes from Santa Rosa into downtown Sebastopol. And then from the Sebastopol town center, you can catch the trail going north, and you can bike or walk on trails away from traffic for the most part. There are a couple sections where you do have to be on the road, but all the way up to Forestville. My son and I rode bikes from Sebastopol to Forestville. We had lunch in Forestville at Sonoma Pizza Company, and then we rode back and made a day of it, and it was lovely. And I walk my dog and walk with friends on that trail all the time. It's a gem, and if you want to be close to the trail, some of the houses actually back right up to the trail, so it's really cool amenity that we have specifically in West County that we can brag about. So I've given you a lot of reasons to love Sebastopol, and I think maybe you might be ready to move after the first part of this video. But before you do, I'll share some, candid reasons that gave me pause to move to this part of the world so that you can make an informed decision. The first thing that I struggled with, and was a personal struggle, it may not be your struggle, but I was sort of sad to come to Sebastopol and lose the diversity that I was used to living in the Bay Area, especially for my kids, because they grew up in a school environment where they had friends whose parents came from all over the world. They came from Japan, they came from South America, they came from parts of Europe, Russia, India. Their friend group was very diverse. And I think because of that, they had a lot of information about how people all over the world live and a lot of respect for different cultures and religions, etc. And so to me, I was a little worried about taking them out of that experience and putting them in an experience where everyone mostly looked like they do. Bringing them to Sebastopol meant bringing them into a place where over 75% of the population is white and looks like them. And I felt like a little nervous about losing that diversity. But that said, the thing that we gained, and depending on where you're coming from, this may not be a gain for you, but it certainly was for us, that we also, in San Francisco, I had been there 25 years, and during all the time I was there, our neighborhood got very expensive and pushed a lot of people out who were just normal people and favored a lot of very wealthy people who could buy the housing and make a life there. And so the demographics of our neighborhood really shifted. And that was reflected in our community, it was reflected in our school. And I felt like my kids were growing up in a little bit of an economic bubble where they had a very skewed sense of what people had. And so coming to Sonoma County, there's certainly a lot of wealth here. It's still a very expensive area, but there's a lot more economic diversity. And they see it and have it in their friend groups. And I actually think that's been a plus because they don't have this expectation that, well, everybody just travels, abroad every time there's a vacation. That is not the reality of most of the people that live in Sonoma County, fortunately, because it's not really in alignment with our values. And so for me, I felt like we traded one thing that was a loss for something else that gave them another experience that I think has informed their development. So, maybe a negative for you, maybe not, but for me, it was something to consider. I will say, despite the fact that Sebastopol is really small and there's a lot to love about that, the downside of living in this small a town is that it just doesn't have as many amenities as a Petaluma or a Healdsburg or a Sonoma. And that's because, the population here can't really support the number and kind of the diversity of shopping that other cities can support. And so when you go downtown in Sebastopol, there have been businesses that had a location in, say, Petaluma that did very well, and they opened a second location in Sebastopol, and it didn't do so well because the community just can't support that specific kind of home goods business. And so we do see a little more turnover in downtown Sebastopol than you'll see in other cities that have a bigger population. For some reason, the restaurants have been more of a destination and they've done better in Sebastopol, but the small shops, luxury shops especially, that have opened downtown we've seen a lot of stores come and go. And so, you may be leaving the area to get some of your shopping, you'll certainly leave the area to get some of your shopping needs met. You won't get it all done in Sebastopol. In addition, another downside of living in this small town is that, the housing stock is restricted. There aren't a lot of houses here for, I think, what is a normal sense of demand for the area. And the town itself, if you really want to live in town and be walking distance to downtown, there just isn't a lot of inventory. And so you might have to wait a while to find the house that's right for you, that's in exactly the right location, because there just isn't a lot of turnover. So, small town's really lovely if you can get in. Related to that, my third point of kind of the downside of Sebastopol is the housing stock here. It's limited. And, a lot of people in Sebastopol have lived here for a very long time. And because it has not historically been an area where there's a tremendous amount of wealth, some of the houses are run down, and the housing stock in general is not necessarily going to be presented in the way that you're used to if you're coming from a more urban environment where people really put a lot of money into their house before they put it on the market, they stage it, they make it really rise to the occasion. And that doesn't always happen in Sebastopol. In fact, less often than not are people really fully staging a home, fully painting a home, fully doing the repairs that are needed to really, make it stand out and be more move-in ready. And so I think if you're looking for something that's move-in ready, it might take you some time. There certainly are more and more homes that are starting to kind of meet the need of that kind of maybe more luxury buyer. But that said, that's not the norm yet in Sebastopol. And so, if you're looking for a home here, especially if you're looking for more modest home, you're probably gonna have to make peace with the fact that you'll have to do some renovation and some work to the house. And the last thing I'll say about Sebastopol, just like Petaluma, is the cost of living here is high. We have a very desirable area, low fire area, beautiful weather, all the wonderful things that I just described, the community, the restaurants, the vibe is very cool, but it comes at a price. And the median price in Sebastopol for the fourth quarter came in just under 1.2 million. In fact, it was about 1.175 million, which is a lot higher than the median price if you look at the county overall, which is hovering right around 800,000. So you're gonna pay a premium to have a Sebastopol address, and that house is gonna need some work. That's a house in town that's on a nice lot, but not a big lot, and it probably needs some renovation. Or it's outside of town, maybe a 8 or 10 minute drive to town on, say, an acre and a half, but the house itself is pretty modest, maybe under 2,000 square feet, and probably in some ways needs some work. So, if you want to spend more, you certainly can, and you'll get a more renovated home, or you'll have an outbuilding or like a barn or an ADU or maybe a pool. If you want a really, really done home in Sebastopol, move-in ready, 2,500 square feet with an extra unit and a pool and a beautiful piece of land, you're certainly going to pay over $2 million. In most parts of Sebastopol, you're going to pay over $2 million for that house. So, it's not cheap. So if the cost of living in Sebastopol sounds prohibitive for you, then maybe you want to look in Western Santa Rosa or in Windsor or even in Katati, where your money's going to go a little further. You can get a little bit more house for the money in those areas than you can in Sebastopol proper. And certainly the closer you are to town, the more you're going to spend. So that's my list of pros and cons for Sebastopol, California. I actually love living here. And so for me, the pros really outweigh the cons, but I'll let you decide and be the judge for your own experience. If you have questions about the town itself, about schools, about quality of life, or more specific questions about real estate here, I'd be glad to be your guide. My name is Stephanie Johnson, and I'm here to help you. As always, I hope you'll subscribe to our channel and you'll hit the bell so you get notified as soon as we drop more videos about life and real estate in Sonoma County. I look forward to creating more videos and helping you decide where you should land in our beautiful county.